Welcome to the latest edition of Dynamic Political Centrism, hosted by Alan Steinberg, produced by Dr. Yonaton Yares.
Our guest tonight, Sean Spiller, Democratic candidate for governor, NJEA president, and former mayor of Montclair.
Good evening and welcome. I am Alan Steinberg, the voice of dynamic political centrism. I am pleased to join you tonight on what is the most difficult night in America, where our civil liberties are threatened more than ever and where our standing in the world is reduced to one of ridicule. But even more than that, right now, hitting close to home, I have great pride in our public school system, where my son and my granddaughter have both been fortunate to attend. And that system is under threat of destruction by our new president of the United States, Donald Trump, a convicted criminal felon who I anticipate will launch some devastating attacks, funding and otherwise, content and otherwise, on our education system. Tonight, it is a pleasure for me to welcome to our show Sean Spiller, who has served honorably as the president of the New Jersey Education Association, representing the advancement and welfare of our teachers who go out every single day to educate our children. I have to say this, and I'll repeat this again later in the broadcast. I'm very proud that my mother was a teacher, rest her soul. I get a little emotional about this. She was a teacher, and I always remember the words that someone told me once: the two most honorable professions, yet the two most ignored in terms of money, are teachers and nursing. And so I'm proud of having been educated in a public school system, and I'm proud of the role my mother played. And I think it's despicable that this administration is hell-bent on destroying our system of education. I'm fortunate for something else tonight. My producer, Dr. Yonaton Yares, Yoni, we all know and love him by this. Now he's the father of 7 kids. I hope the education system is good for them when they start. And he is a product of Rutgers. He's a product of our education system. And I'm proud of that, but he also is expert on the public school system and the issues that are facing education in this state and how they may be affected by Donald Trump. So for the first half of the program, I'm going to rely on Yoni's expertise to ask the very particular questions on the education system of Sean Spiller and how it may be affected by Trump and by our country right now. And then the second half, I will deal with the political issues that are involved in Sean's campaign. I must say this, and then I'll turn it over to Yoni. I'm proud that Sean is running. I know Sean. I didn't say I endorsed him or anybody else on this show, but he brings credit, he brings honor to this election, and he is a person that I think will upgrade the level of discourse, particularly on education issues, because New Jersey can be proud of its education system, but it's going to be under attack. With nothing else to say, I'll turn this over to Dr. Yonaton Yares. Thank you for being here, and good luck now that you have 7 kids. You have a basketball team of 5 plus 2 reserves, and and they can learn hockey from Dr. Sean Spiller.
well, Alan, first let's say thank you so much for having me on, and Yoni, big congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. It's been an interesting week, but now it's back to reality tomorrow when I go back to the classroom. And spend my time. Yes, I'm also beyond that. I'm also a teacher. I'm a proud New Jersey teacher. I went through my entire education in New Jersey through my doctorate, are all from New Jersey institutions. I probably the walking advertisement for education in New Jersey. It works.
Listen, I'm right there with you, by the way. My schooling all New Jersey, and then certainly Rutgers graduate myself, and now a high school science teacher, right, and leading the Education Association. But Jersey, we've got great schools, and certainly I think we're living proof of what we can do together.
So yes, so to start off with that, I was very disturbed on Monday listening or fake listening to the inauguration address where the current president said, and we have an education system that teaches our children to be ashamed of themselves, in many cases to hate our country, despite the love that we try so desperately to provide to them. All of this will change starting today, and it will change very quickly. So this leads me to question, as an educator, our goal is to provide a critical concept that we work on presenting Over time, there were challenges. I'll bring up my favorite one to bring up is the internment camps of Japanese during World War II. That was a dark stain on our past and that we're still trying to recover from. But how do we work on explaining to those who are not in the classroom how, when we're talking about back challenging times, we're not saying we hate America, we're saying we're understanding historical concepts.
Yeah, you know what, I say this. First off, when I listen to the president's comments there, I think it's just clear to call it out what it is. It's rubbish, right? He's just wrong. It's ridiculous. And I think maybe the best place for folks to start, if they have a child or if they know somebody who's in the school system, have a conversation. Have a conversation with them about what they're learning and the fact that, first and foremost, every single student who comes into our care, we want to make sure they feel safe and they feel supported and they feel loved in a way that they can learn and thrive and be successful. And beyond that, you're right. When we teach, I'm a science teacher, certainly, but when we teach history or anything else, we teach a full accounting, right? A full accounting of our history because we know that that's the only way, quite frankly, that we all can move forward, learn from things in the past that we hope to do better. You'll learn from those examples where we are inspired, but also where we're troubled and disheartened and sometimes embarrassed. Yes, because those actions, are moments in our history where we say, we could have done better. We could have done better as a nation. And by understanding that and understanding, how that applies today and maybe more relevant today than any of us would like, but understanding then how in these moments it's important to not be silent when we see things that are wrong and when we know there are ways we can do something about it.
Excellent. And then I think bringing that up around to the question of social motion, we spoke a little bit about that. And we've got social motion, SEL, and DEI seem to be the current in acronyms that we're trying to attack currently from the current administration. And try to better explain that to people, especially what it means in the classroom. To give some anecdotal evidence to this is, as a proud teacher, and a student from Cherry Hill, I did not have a single teacher of color outside my foreign language classes my entire K-12 education. And I graduated in 2006. Not that far ago.
Yeah. Well, I'd say for students graduating today, that's still a reality for many folks. Yeah, I think when we have the conversation first, when we talk about social emotional well-being of our students, of our staff, or others, making sure we're centering and understanding that. I think shame on us if we forget how recently we were dealing with a worldwide pandemic like we have not seen in a generation, and certainly that's important to understand that we've got to make sure that kids feel supported before they can learn, right? They've got to feel safe before they can learn, right? And so checking in on their well-being is an important first step to anything. And beyond that, when we talk about their other favorite target, diversity, equity, inclusion, what are we talking about here? We're talking about celebrating our rich diversity. Certainly, our state is a great example. We know that our diversity makes us strong. We understand that the power that we all bring to bear collectively is based on, I don't have to know everything that you know. I don't have to have the lived experience that you have, because when we come together, when we work together, your pieces, your strengths are going to support areas maybe where I don't know as much or have as much expertise and vice versa. So that's the power of understanding that when we learn about the diversity, the great diversity that we have in this state and in this country, we recognize it as a strength, and we understand how to harness that in a way where we learn about the contributions that so many folks have had throughout our history. Our students see themselves in our history. It becomes much more real for them, and they understand then what their future can look like. Because when you realize the significance of those who come before you, and understanding that their role in history, while oftentimes has been ignored, when we are able to highlight that, you can see yourselves in our future as well. And that's where we want to be. We want to be a nation where we say every single one of our students is going to bring something special and an opportunity to help us grow as a nation. We're going to celebrate that. We're going to celebrate that rich diversity as a strength. And that's what we're talking about here.
So one last thing on the national level, and then we're going to get more into the local thing because all elections are local. And that we still have to protect New Jersey and New Jersey's interests. So also during our dear president's speech, he talked about we are now going to be a nation that's colorblind. So from my own personal perspective, that used to be when I didn't know and understand what it meant, how I saw things because I wasn't learned enough. I didn't go through the process. So for you as a person of color who's a senior leader in a field that still is predominantly not diverse yet. What does that mean to you?
Well, it means that he's a few years behind, obviously, in terms of where he's at, and understanding this, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there when you talk about that. I say that as a black man, and that when we talk about I'm not going to see things as color and be color blind. Well, appreciate that, but everybody else sees it on black. Everybody else sees color, and understanding that while we talk about what we see in front of us, we have to talk about the systems that have been set up, right? The systems that are in place that still unfortunately benefit some and disadvantage others, right? And if we don't come to terms and understand that there are just quite frankly centuries of this of these challenges, we're never going to be able to have an honest conversation about where we still need to go and how we can, fight to help improve this country that we all love, right? You're always striving to make things better. We know that as educators, you're always, no matter the lesson, you're looking at going, how can I improve, right? And that's what this is about too, to say, when we talk about race and we understand that, for some, and it sometimes can be an uncomfortable conversation, it's important that we have it. It's important that we engage folks and especially our youth in these spaces, because if you can't talk about it, you can't address things and you can't make things better. And we've got to feel comfortable in a space where we can have these important conversations.
Excellent. So now taking it a little bit more closer to home. Um, so in New Jersey, school funding, I think, would be one of the top three issues every election. They're predominantly funded through property taxes every 5 or 6 years. We got the new gold study plan, and we still go back to property taxes.
Hmm.
There seems to be no action or no forward thinking in terms of it. So, as an educator, someone who understands exactly where those funds go to, and that many districts, well over 60% of the budget is their cost of people cost. What solutions or ideas do you come to the table to address how can we set up a secure line of funding for our schools that aren't necessarily dependent on property tax or can be in addition to that?
I think the key piece for folks to recognize is that every time the state is able to come in with state funding and state dollars, it means we're saving money on our property taxes. And those state dollars, the opportunities for ways to come in is much more equitable. There are many different revenue streams, and certainly, we can look at some of those other, massive corporations or billionaire sources that can help fund things. So it's important to recognize that, because when we talk about, whoever's sitting in the governor's seat, we can see exactly what it means, right? We had our previous governor who underfunded our schools by $1 billion per year. One of the
We
first
know who that governor was.
We know who that governor was, right? And one of the first things he did, right? He came in, he stole every district's surplus dollars. He went in and underfunded them by $1 billion. And we know, right? What does that mean? It means that districts and towns and municipalities that wanted to make sure their students didn't miss out and had what they needed, you had to raise property taxes. You had to make up that gap, right? And we're seeing that in some ways still today, right? Because when our schools and parents and families and communities want to make sure their schools are doing well and their students have what they need, when we don't invest the way we should at the state level, a good example of it right now is with our recruitment and retention of educators, right? We can't get people to come into the profession. We can't get people to stay. And we're surprised when we look at it, though, we say, well, wait a minute, the promise that was always made was you're never going to make a ton of money, but we're going to make sure that in retirement you've got a decent pension, you've got benefits, and those things have been eroded. So right now we can't get folks in, but what does it mean? It means that in district after district, they're saying, in order to compete, I've got to hire Sean Spiller, the science teacher, not at step one, but step 6, 7, 8, 9. It means that when they look and they say, well, I've got to try and steal him away from the district next door, I'm going to offer a $20,000 signing bonus if he comes over. All of those dollars are paid with local property taxes, as opposed to a state investing dollars in a stock market for 20, 25 years, which is going to have earnings and then return to somebody who's also contributed to their pensions. It provides stability and it provides savings at the local level. We're oftentimes just short-sighted in terms of where we go and what we attack, and it ended up costing us especially dearly in the property tax space in the long run. So we've got to address these things with state investment, right? We've got to invest dollars in top quality education because it's at the core of our economy. The reason we have the businesses that we do that are drawn in New Jersey is because of our strong and well-educated labor force. It's the reason why people want to move their families here also to work for a lot of these entities and companies, because they want the great schools that we have for their kids, the property values that we all certainly are excited about when we own a home. We've got to talk about how you can afford a home to begin with, though. But those are all built around having great schools and the supports that we have in New Jersey. We've got to invest as a state, right? And any investment that we do helps reduce those property taxes. And I think, as we look at affordability, that's one of the key pillars of what I'm running on, right? It's about how do we make New Jersey more affordable, and I'm mindful that we can do that by addressing the high cost of housing, whether that's ownership or renting. It's about addressing quality early education, right? That's a major expense for people with young families. It's about making sure that our healthcare costs, which is a big burden on employers and employees, we can provide quality care at a reduced cost. And it's making sure our seniors and others who are, faced with those property taxes that they can't afford, but also can't afford to move, we're providing the relief that they need. That means investing from the state, putting those dollars into those spaces that can reduce those costs. That allows folks to keep more money in their pockets. And quite frankly, when we see, all of these warehouses and big businesses and everyone else, making billions of dollars off of us each and every day, there's plenty of spots where we can look at to make sure that as we all benefit from this economy, everybody pays their fair share, and we support the working folks here in this state who really need help and some relief.
So actually, I was going to go on teacher shortage, but you covered that very nicely. But you also spoke or touched upon school facilities. So I know a little bit way too much about this, having lived through the Cherry Hill School District's bond of $363 million, and I'm now in Willingboro, where we're about to go to vote in March for their bond. So what do we do about facilities? Our facilities across the state are ancient. Our bond referendum funded new construction at $1.41 per square foot. That hasn't been the cost of a square foot since before the 90s. And it was created in 1997, I think is when they set that value. So how do we work on that when school facilities also impact property value? And you can't have a kid learning with water dropping on their head. And if that happens, the town collapses, everything goes back to education. So
Yeah, listen, I think you're spot on. I think just to put it in context for folks, and you're in education, so you get it. But I say it as mayor as well. Like, in our township, we saw from the Infrastructure Act, and big thank you to President Biden for that work. But we saw about $6 million come into our community to help with some of the infrastructure on our school buildings. But to your point, and the numbers you just threw around in terms of what each district is looking at, appreciate that, but districts need 300 million. They need, 350 million, right? So, that puts in context of even those dollars that sometimes people hear at the federal level and say, wow, that sounds like a decent amount of money that we're trying to invest in improving our infrastructure, our schools. It is a drop in the bucket of what is needed because, we have buildings that are, as you note, right, 100 years old and, need new roofs and, need replacing of the lead water lines and, don't have any air conditioning and we're getting warmer and hotter on more of our days. And, we can't have students who are distracted or can't learn, right? So all of these things I think are challenges that we have to look at in terms of, how are we investing in our kids, right? Because I think that's the end of the day what we're talking about, right? The second your office building, the second your place of employment, the second that air conditioning goes down on a 100-degree day, they call it, right? Go home. We can't do this. Oh my God, nobody can work in this. But every day we send our kids into that environment and we don't bat an eye and we don't think anything of it. And we're trying to say to them, well, we've got to learn complex issues and be successful and compete in the world. Right. We've got to understand that the investments that we make there are for our long-term benefit. They're going to have to be much more substantial than we see now. And certainly as we look at the SDA and the funding that we need for both our ROD district, our regular operating districts, and certainly our former Abbott and other districts, we've got to make sure that we are significantly moving forward, helping our economy, investing in construction projects and other pieces. Doing so in a smart way, investing in green technologies and other pieces and advancements, but understanding that that's an investment that's well needed, and it certainly can't be something where we again treat as an afterthought and just leave it up to communities to be the ones who are really doing the significant bonding to improve their buildings.
all right, so I've got two more questions before I turn it over to Alan for the policy. So we talked about funding and things like that. So one of my biggest complaints is pilot money, so payment in lieu of taxes. eats up money, and a lot of times that money doesn't get it back to the school districts because property taxes for businesses would necessarily be split between the township and the school district. But from my understanding, Pilot cuts out, in some cases, cuts the school district out, and it's just a big check to the township. So would you consider Pilot reform or Pilot adaptation? To one, we still want to spur development, but then how do we also make sure that we're not then harming A to save C?
Yeah. You know what? I think it's got to be a comprehensive approach that people look at their communities and say, hey, folks, this is all like one thing, right? And what I mean by that is this: we often get into this turf, space of like there's municipal dollars that people pay in taxes, there's school dollars people pay in taxes. Hey guys, I get the one bill, right? I get the one bill and I know I have to pay it, and it includes my municipal, includes my school taxes. Like, how do we figure out the most constructive way to make sure we are most efficiently using the dollars we're getting collaboratively to save dollars, right? Now, you noted specifically with pilots, right? They have a place. Their place is to spur some development and growth in traditionally portions of a community maybe that are underserved or underutilized or underdeveloped in that sense. So we want to make sure we still have tools there that are available to municipalities to encourage that and to get people into a space that has been left, maybe barren for too long, right? And get revenue and other resources from that. So that's important. But I think we also have to have the conversation as we saw, as we saw what happened in Jersey City, right? Where they said, hey, listen, because of what has happened and some of the inequities that have existed in terms of the school funding, especially because of pilots, they looked at other ways that the city in that instance could get corporate payroll taxes to help offset some of those lost dollars over those years, because those were the entities that had benefited from the pilot agreements and other things as well, right? So I do think we have to look at it to say, hey, listen, there's an approach that works, and certainly places that look at their schools and municipalities as partnerships and one set of dollars that folks pay to make sure they get what they need, both their schools and their townships and cities. That's great, but the places where it's being abused, and certainly there are both abuses on both sides of that, meaning those taking advantage of it and those offering it for maybe those opportunities that then come their way later. It's important that we do have safeguards and guardrails around those pieces, but we also have to understand that it still has an important role to play in instances where it's used properly.
Excellent. So my last topic, which actually overlaps nicely between where Alan and I are going, from our previous governor who we've been picking on, and he well deserves to be picked on, he set up the New Jersey residency rule, which had a dramatic effect in the classroom, but also across all areas of public employment. University, any public employee now has to live in New Jersey, which in theory sounds wonderful, but many people are married and have spouses. It's a very rarity now where you don't have a two-income household to be able to be successful and be able to keep a roof over your head. How would you amend or revise the residency rule or look at that in terms of our public employees across education and government, and such?
Yeah. First, I think we should get rid of it, right? So let me just be blunt. I think we should get rid of it. I think as we talk to those colleagues in the legislature, right, and talk to them about what we can do to move us in that direction, let's talk about bringing in a pilot where we see what happens when we create a 2-3 year opportunity for us to put that aside. Look, there's no secret. We are facing shortages, not just in education, but education certainly. But we're facing shortages in a lot of different spaces and sectors. And right now to be holding the line on that requirement is hurting us, right? It's hurting our ability to fill positions. And quite frankly, I'm more concerned about the classroom that doesn't have a teacher in front of it, and the fact that we have 30, 35, 40 kids in a classroom because we don't have enough staff, or that we're not able to offer AP physics because we can't find that teacher because they're living across the border. I'm more concerned about that than I am the person having to physically live in New Jersey, right? That's our bigger concern right now. That's going to hurt us more than any counter argument that someone could make. So I think it's important in having those conversations with the legislature, but certainly as governor, I would do all I can to say, we have to put this to the side. There's just no room for it when we're facing the challenges that we are now in terms of staffing positions.
Excellent. All right, Alan, I now turn it over to you for the policy portion of this, not related to education.
Well, and the political portion.
Yes, and that too.
Well done.
Thank you.
Sean, I want to comment on something that I haven't heard a lot of publicity about, but it could be a substantial advantage for you over one of your rivals in the campaign. I served under Governor Whitman, and I could comment on a whole show about her pluses and minuses, but there was one thing she had experience in that served her very well, and that is what I call intergovernmental experience. She had been a county freeholder director. She had been that's a local experience. She had at the state level been the head of the Board of Public Utilities. Now, I spent a lot of time just sitting in her office discussing matters, both of my job at the Meadowlands Commission and also when I was Deputy Commerce Commissioner. And governing, what I learned is it's largely an intergovernmental function. It's how you deal with the local and state relationship. Because you have been the mayor of Montclair, and very successfully, I might add, you have that intergovernmental experience. And if you become governor, you won't have to have on-the-job training, although every new governor learns things they didn't know before, but you will have the intergovernmental qualification. One of your rival candidates, Mikey Sherrill, is also from Montclair, but she has no intergovernmental experience in terms of, she's never served in state government, never served in local government. How vital do you think the intergovernmental experience will be, and how it can stand you in good stead?
I think you make an excellent point, and certainly want to touch on that. But I also want to come from a place that I think is also a strength that I don't really think anyone else brings in the way that I can, and that's just the lived experience as somebody who comes from and is a fighter for the hardworking folks in the state right now, right? I say that because everything I've ever looked at, you asked about my time as mayor and even council person. But to those positions, I brought the fact that I understood how hard New Jersey is to afford, and understood that personally, right? In terms of struggling to be able to afford my first home, or, now, taking care of our kids, or all these other pieces. It's always been through that lens that I've led in those spaces. And I think that at the core is ultimately so important, because having a governor who understands our residents and understands that affordability piece, and making lives a little better is what's going to really matter. But you're right, from there, as mayor, and I know the other mayors would say this, I've had the chance to carry out and implement policies and enact things that can help folks directly in our communities. But also I've had the opportunity as the NJEA president to serve up and down this state, representing educators in each and every one of our communities, understanding that our values are substantively the same, but the nuances in terms of how we express those and how we get to the places we need to does vary. If you're in Sussex County, or you're in Camden County, or you're in Cape May. So I think each of these pieces, in total, is what grounds our campaign, in terms of knowing what we fight for, knowing who we fight for each and every day, and having those experiences, as you note, where we've seen it in action, in our specific communities, seen it in action in a number of communities in my other role, and certainly understanding the need for us to be able to fight together, and fight for what we need in each and every one of our communities.
Now, you mentioned one aspect of funding that is a very vital point with me, and I'll tell you what it is. You talk about AP courses. I didn't understand the value of those courses until I had already graduated high school, and my high school was a very good high school. It was in Western Pennsylvania, but they didn't really have any AP courses. Now, let me tell you why I feel I missed out on something. I went to Northwestern, that had one of the finest history curriculums in the country. And at Northwestern, I became a history obsessive person. That sounds funny, but it's the truth. I am basically a center right political figure. I've been center left at times too, which surprises people. But I basically have adhered to consensus history, but I read a lot of revisionist history, and I have usually learned something by studying revisionist history. It didn't mean I bought the whole package. But you cannot be a history intellectual. You cannot be a person who can have a real sensible discussion on history unless you read all forms of thought. The same is true of political science, whether it's consensus, whether it is the revisionist, you learn something. Now, evidently in high school now, with advanced AP courses in history, you can learn something other than just consensus history. I'm concerned that if these funding cutbacks affect the strength of the curriculum of history in high school, it's going to do our students a disservice. So, what is your feeling on whether AP courses will be able to survive the scare to come?
Well, I'll tell you, I would take it even further than that. I am extremely concerned, is the short answer. I'm extremely concerned, not just about our AP courses, though, although there's an important point in what you note. I will say I am concerned in that, while his claim and rhetoric about eliminating the Department of Education, may or may not come to fruition. What certainly I think is possible is there's strings attached to the funding that we do get. And that could include, limitations on the curriculum that we teach and making sure we're teaching a Trump history as opposed to a true history, right? And I think those are concerns when, we start wholesale rewriting things out of history or writing things into history in a very different way. I think it goes, maybe it's revisionist history on steroids, but I'm very concerned that he will utilize, some of that funding as leverage to try to put us in a place where we all will know what the right thing to do is, but we'll also be in a challenging situation where, in an already tight budget, that leverage will cause tough decisions to be made. Bottom line is we have to stay true to who we are and our values, and understanding that at the end of the day, it is through a robust education that our students are best served when they hear all of the different pieces and perspectives and questions and thoughts, and we want to make sure they're presented with all of them, regardless of what a president or anyone may do to threaten us to try and limit their ability to learn as opposed to expand it.
I heartily concur, and that is why I also am a strong advocate of CRT, because I think that our students, white and black, have to be aware of the obstacles that have faced African Americans. For example, I have two favorite Americans of the 20th century. Now, it seems to be an odd mix, but to me, the two greatest individuals in America in the 20th century, one was Dwight David Eisenhower, who was a hero in war and a hero of peace, but the other was Jackie Roosevelt Robinson. And I think, and Martin Luther King once said that if it wasn't for Jackie Roosevelt Robinson, he never could have accomplished the things that he accomplished. Because when you had fans go out to a ball game, and before Jackie integrated baseball, the Baseball Guide, which was published by Sporting News, had a foreword. It's unbelievable that America was ever like this. The foreword said, "Baseball is a game played by Caucasian gentlemen." That's sickening when you think of it, but that is what the Baseball Guide said before Jackie integrated baseball when he signed a contract with the Brooklyn Dodgers. I mourn their departure every year. But when he signed his contract on October 23rd, 1945, that changed. All of a sudden, people got used to seeing an African American and a great African American ball player playing. So I think these are things that our students need to be educated about. And I am concerned that without AP courses, there may be limits placed. Particularly, this man wants to abolish the Department of Education. I'm not so sure he'll do that. He wants to do that, but I think somehow he will have someone in his administration that is focused on curriculum and limiting it. That's a concern I have.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's exactly right. I think that those are the challenges we're going to face. And I'll certainly say, just a reflection on history, I think, there's been so many folks that have, that have made advancements, right? Both in little ways and big ways, but all of it adds up to making positive change. And to ignore that, to write that out of the history books, to not recognize the struggles that they had, and quite frankly, that folks still have, is a disservice to just a reflection on who we are, looking in the mirror and understanding that as great a nation as we are, we have to understand our past and our troubled past at times. And we've got to understand there's still work to be done, right? But through that work, we become stronger, right? We are, baseball is much better off for the changes that have happened over the years, and certainly we're much better off as a country. And the more we continue to embrace the fact that positive reflection and change and understanding to try to move us in a direction that makes things better for our kids and the next generation is a good thing. Look, there's no secret about it. I think this president's going to try and move us in the other direction. So everything I just said picture him trying to do the opposite. That's what he said, right? He said that. So we don't have to guess. We don't have to wonder. That's what he's going to try and do. But I will also say that's why it really, really matters who is the next governor of our state. And that's why I'm running, because I think this is a key moment in our history where we say this is our chance to stand up and to speak truly to our values, and to show the nation and the world what we stand for, and that we stand for every single one of our residents, every single one of our students. We stand for an open and rich accounting of our history and an understanding. We stand for folks who are told the truth and certainly learn from it. And we're gonna keep living in that space no matter what Trump does.
I concur. Now I have an election strategy question for you. I'm not a consultant to any of the campaigns, but I'm going to put on an amateur consultant hat. You are in a primary that is unusual for two reasons. Number one is the fact that there is no line, no county line this year, which I think enables a candidate who doesn't have a lot of support from the political county chairs, people like that, gives a much better chance. But the second thing is you have a multiplicity of candidates. You have 6 candidates who've announced. I wouldn't be surprised if there was another announcement, but for right now, it's 6 candidates, which means that the amount of votes that a candidate needs to win the primary is less than normal. But I heard something, and I'm not saying this positively or negatively. I go around, I discuss the election with a lot of people, political and otherwise, journalists. And I heard one thing relevant to you that I haven't, it's not a negative, but I haven't heard this before. You represent the largest, I believe the NJEA is the largest state employee union. There are other unions as well. And this person asked me, and maybe you've done this, I don't know, but it's important that I ask you this. They said potentially he could build a base of all the state and local county various unions, because I'll tell you, I have an interest. It's not going to be what my decision is based on. I have a state pension. I haven't had a COLA, a cost of living adjustment, since I retired. I mean, it's incredible. I retired from the state system back in I believe 2009, I believe it was. Well, I forget already, but it was after I had 10 years in. Actually, that was 2002. Okay, so I haven't had a cost of living adjustment all these years. The biggest complaint I have when I'm having dinner or whatever with other veterans of state government is they've never had the cost of living adjustment. Now, this is a legitimate. I think that state employees are taken for granted, not just teachers, but state employees who have developed expertise in various fields. And we have a government of experts in Trenton. That is where we run into problems. So my question of you is there any vision on your part of getting together, you as a person experienced with the teachers union and other state employees unions, of adding to your base by getting endorsement from these other state employee unions and county employee unions?
Yeah, well, thanks for that question. And certainly, look, our campaign, my work is about earning every vote and growing that base of support in every space that I can. You might imagine, yes, there are conversations. There's conversations I've had that I continue to have with other spaces in labor, because we obviously start with some shared interests, right? We start with some shared interests in terms of the work we've done fighting for working class folks in this state for quite some time, and we've been in those same battles together. So it's a natural space where I think we start from, and of course I still work to earn that support and know that I'll be a big supporter of what we need in this state to make sure we continue to attract and both recruit and retain great folks and then support them in these positions. So it's not lost on me, as you noted before, to get to your win number. You're trying to build coalitions, and certainly we are the largest labor union in the state. But growing that and amplifying that only makes us stronger in this position in terms of running. And I do that though in the context of broadly trying to have a conversation with every single resident in New Jersey, trying to earn their support, sharing our vision for a New Jersey that's more affordable, that works for them. And we talk about that affordability, yourself as somebody who hasn't had that cost of living increase in far too long. they got away with it in the beginning because inflation wasn't what it is now. But that has really come home where people are seeing, folks having to live in ways where the dollars are go less and less and less. And we want people to be able to live in retirement with dignity, not into despair and certainly destitute. So we've got to address that. There's a number of ways we can look at that. Immediately right off the bat, providing an extra pension payment or something along those lines that move us in the right direction to kind of make up some of that shortfall that's been occurring. But it is something that I think we have to take seriously if we talk about how much we care for all of our residents and oftentimes our seniors. This is a big piece of the conversation, and understanding that while this was something that was relatively recently taken away, it is having a major impact now, especially with inflation and everything else that we're seeing. So it's something I'm committed to working to help fix, and certainly I know that I hope that other labor organizations, as you mentioned, will be right there in support of our work and our vision.
Well, I would add this on too. Teaching is not a super lucrative job. One of the things that Tom
That's
King
true.
did that I will always give him credit for, that was an understatement. I'm not
Yeah, it
known
was
for
an understatement.
understatement.
I had to pause there, going like, "Are you going to try and say that with a serious face?" Because yeah, that's an understatement, a significant one. But yes,
Well, it is.
yeah,
It definitely is.
yeah,
The one thing Kane did when he boosted salaries, he recognized the professionalism of teachers, I felt. And it's interesting. A former friend of mine had been teaching in the Jewish parochial system, which is an honorable system. I'm not knocking the system, but she was getting like $40,000 a year. Back in, I think it was 2002, all of a sudden, she was offered a job in a public school system that paid $95,000. That's a hell of a disparity. And she was a very good teacher, a very good teacher. But at the time, people were going to miss her in the religious school system where she had taught. But I told them, they said, "Oh, we're going to miss her." I said, "Hey, she's entitled to a good life, and she is working for that $95,000. So that leads to the other thing is, I think, the private schools don't have pensions. At least the public schools have a pension. But in order to attract good students in the colleges, I think the pension is absolutely vital. Otherwise, if the pension is not enough to really enable a retired teacher to live a decent standard of living, you're not going to have the kind of capable teachers that we need to attract.
Well, I'll say this, and not to get in the weeds of it too much here, but I will say, even the pension system that you describe, and you say, public schools and public sector employees have this pension. Let's be clear about what it is right now and why it's been such a challenge. A public employee right now pays 7.5% of their salary into the pension system. Right now, that has a value of about 8% of their salary, right? So they're putting in 7.5%. The state is putting in 0.5%, right? Or maybe a little less. That is not something where, you are going to attract and retain folks, right? Because I can go to any other employer and get a better match, than that.
Absolutely.
Now, certainly, when I first started, and I would imagine for you, there was a much more equitable system. I put in 7.5%, the state put in 7.5%, right? And we got our pension, and that's what we'd earned. And in retirement, we would get those dollars. But to say to somebody now, oh, by the way, you're still paying that 7.5%, but we've degraded the pension to a point where it's only worth 0.5 more, and that's what the state's contributing. That's a huge piece of the reason why we can't recruit and retain folks. So part of that promise that we talked about, right? Making sure that even folks who are going to go in and start out and take those jobs paying $40,000 a year, or going to dedicate their careers to a space where they could have earned much more in the private sector. Hey, listen, we have to understand that part of that deal is it comes with a pension that's reasonable and certainly fair. And we've got to get back to that. It is a much smarter system. It goes back to our earlier conversation around property taxes, because it is how we ensure that places are able to pull someone in, because even that educator you're trying to bring into maybe the public sector side, and say come teach. you don't have to offer, $100,000 starting if you're saying, oh, and by the way, I have a really decent pension for you. You're going to contribute, state's going to contribute, but you're going to get it after you've dedicated that career. You then, are able to bring folks in, which has traditionally been what happened, at a lower dollar amount, right? Than quite frankly they're worth. So, with that, we've got to get back to that in some ways because that smart investment will also help us on the property tax side.
Well, as a retiree, once I retired, boy, did I appreciate that pension.
Yeah.
Because seniors have continuing expenses. They don't have the income that when they were working full time. So that's vital. And I think today's students graduating college are well aware of that from their parents' experience and from friends. I want to mention something that I never thought was going to be an issue in my life. When I was I was a Republican before Trump, and when I was the Republican Assembly education policy advisor, I worked a lot with the NJEA, but I worked a lot with the other organizations like principals and supervisors, the School Board Association. Sometimes these associations agreed, but in 1993, when we put together a funding package working with the Florio administration then, there were differences. Not enough to lead to anything destructive, but there were differences among these associations. Now, in the year 2025, I see a need for all these associations to get together on the very lives and public safety of our students. I'm listening to this Homan, Tom Homan, who is in charge of the deportation. He's a thug. He's an all-out thug. And if they start going into the private schools, and public schools, I should say, and they have said that they'll drag people out of there, which is going to be a hard thing for us to explain to our children and grandchildren. So I think there is going to be a need for all of these associations. I'm not castigating anybody, for the NJEA, for the principals and supervisors and everybody else to get together, because you're going to be acting in loco parentis, so to speak. You're responsible for the safety of those children, and you're responsible for their emotions. So I feel, and I'd like you to comment on this, you're going to have to all be together. I'm sure you will. But when you're approaching, when you have people going in for from ICE and others to just pull people out of the classrooms and just absolutely scare the living hell out of them to leave the country, and if they're not going to succeed in getting rid of birthright citizenship, but until the court throws it out, who knows how it will be enforced by the Trump administration and others. Until that happens, everybody's at risk, including kids who may have birthright citizenship. So I think that you're going to have to get together all these education associations and approach the political leaders to get their cooperation as to what could be a terrifying experience once the deportations start.
Well, let me say this, and I say it as a teacher myself, and certainly as a dad of two young kids. What the president is doing in this instance is appalling, right? It is cowardly to have the person who is, by all accounts, the most powerful person in the world, literally pick on the most vulnerable, right? Our young children. Talk about sending, ICE agents into a classroom to rip a student away from their desk as they're trying to color or read or write, and go detain them and deport them. It's just unacceptable. And when you talk about the trauma that's there, just remind folks, it's the trauma for that student and their families, but it's the trauma for every other kid in that class. Because I can tell you right now that my 7-year-old, when they come home, will not say, "Oh, Dad, I'm worried because they, pulled, my peer out and their immigration status was on the line." They're going to say, "Wait a minute, there are people coming in, ripping kids out of our classroom and taking them away." And that is the trauma that every single student in that classroom will face, and the educators, right? So,
and your children will be worried.
Yeah, oh, come on. Of course they will be worried, right? And of course they will be worried. That is a traumatic thing to experience. And I think it's appalling. I think it's just appalling. I think it's cowardly and certainly, to your point, like, and I say this having just met with all of those other groups you just talked about. We had conversations with our Commissioner of Education, and talked about exactly what we could do, the guidance that we could offer, the protections we could in place, the partnership that we could engage in with our state attorney general, and certainly look at ways we can push back against this just cruel action from the president here. Those conversations are absolutely ongoing. They will continue because we are all equally troubled. You noted before, there are moments where we disagree here or there on things, but I can tell you we are all lockstep, united in terms of making sure our kids are safe and making sure they're supported, and that's what we do. And so, we're going to do everything in our power, work with any organization, any government entity. We're gonna work with everyone we can to make sure we're doing all we can so that every single student that is in our charge is safe, right? That is the most important thing we can do. And the president can be a bully all he wants, but we're we all understand to try to protect kids from bullying each and every day, and this is the ultimate form of bullying and intimidation and just fear, and we're not gonna stand by while this happens. We are gonna make sure we are pushing back, and we're gonna make sure that we are doing all we can to keep our kids safe.
Well, one thing that gives me hope in this regard, I know Attorney General Matt Platkin very well. I have a very friendly relationship. And I was proud that he is involved with this association of the various attorneys general who are going to fight back against Trump when he starts to basically vitiate and destroy the prerogatives of state government and the prerogatives of protecting our children. So I have no doubt that you and other leaders of education associations and groups will be, I'm sure you've done this already, will be cooperating very closely with the State Department of Law and Public Safety in protecting our kids. I think it's going to have to be this joint effort.
It will be. It's going to be important. That's what we're going to do. But I think it's up to every resident. We have to look at ourselves and say, we've often heard this over the course of history, and maybe we repeat it and we say it as a thought or a statement. This is when we're truly going to be tested. Already this president has said, he's going to go after those folks who don't do what he says, right? He's going to go after elected officials who don't enforce his immigration policies. He's going to go after folks, again, who are maybe trying to protect our kids. It's going to be now in these moments when we look around and we say, is it you they're coming for today to find some reason to pull you out and throw you in jail? Is it your neighbor? Is it your mayor who stands up with a sanctuary city? Is it your teacher who doesn't allow ICE to come in and grab that 7-year-old? Is it your is it your who knows who, your friend? Every single one of us is at risk, and I think that this is those moments when we have to look at each other and say, we can't be quiet about this. We can't sit by and allow this to happen. We have to speak up. We have to do what we can and understand that these are the moments in history where we say we will not compromise on our values. This is not who we are as Americans, and we're not going to tolerate it.
Well, what you say is not only right on, it's becoming clear to people who didn't take it seriously before. Let me just tell you a quick vignette. I have been probably the most critical journalist when it comes to Donald Trump in New Jersey. And I've been that way since he came down that escalator and he started talking about Mexican rapists. So I have not held back. I left the Republican Party. And I told people during the campaign that if Trump was elected and he had Kash Patel, who was a lowlife thug, appointed as FBI director, I mean, he makes J. Edgar Hoover look like a saint, okay? And that's a hard comparison to make. I said, I fully anticipate that I would be one of the person they would seek retribution against and that I could be sent to jail. Now, I have an attorney, and the attorney told me I was right for taking the threat seriously. He said, but I'll have you out in 20 minutes on a writ of habeas corpus. And I believe him because he's a real competent attorney. But I think all of us who are endangered by Trump, whether it's in education, whether it's in journalism, we have to stand together. And that's why, quite frankly, I'm happy to see you in this campaign and the perspective, whether people vote for you or don't vote for you, you're making a positive contribution. And I think
let's have them vote for me, right? If those are the choices,
why do you think we had you on the
vote for
show?
me. We'll, out of those two options, we'll go with that one.
I understand.
but listen, you're spot on. I mean, as you share your story, I mean, I know you didn't fully express in this way, but look, what you're talking about is it's an understandable worry or fear, some might say.
It is.
You've got somebody who is very powerful, the most powerful person in the world, who is going to be targeting folks who he thinks haven't been nice to him or have criticized him or don't listen to him or all those pieces. And unfortunately or fortunately, there's a lot of us that are in that category. And if we don't stand together, if we don't in these moments realize that we're all human and we all are worried sometimes, and we all know what's on the line at times, and we all fear for our families and our friends. And it's important, right? This is when that solidarity, when that unity is going to matter. And I'll just say, know that I'll be standing right there with you, because as much as it is about you, it's about our ability to all still live in a country where we're free to express ourselves, we're free to speak the truth to power, we're free to associate with whom we want, and if we start to let that go, we've lost everything. So we have to stand together on this.
Well, you've expressed it very well. We're living in a time, and I'll close with this. One of the TV shows that I watched on HBO was The Plot Against America by Philip Roth, which involved anti-Semitism and the threat that Charles Lindbergh would have posed to America had he been elected in 1940. Well, I feel like I'm living through a version of that right now, except it's Donald Trump. The issue isn't anti-Semitism. The issue is deporting people of color, discriminating against people of color, eliminating civil liberties. But it's very much the same as that TV show that I watched. So I'll close with a little bit of a prayer. First of all, I thank you for coming on. I think that you bring unique qualities to this campaign, the quality of being a public official, the quality of understanding the most vital issue in the state on a continuing basis, which is education, and a belief in America and a belief in civil liberties. So you have enhanced this campaign, and I wish you the best of luck. I read your mail pieces. I've started to see more of you on TV, so I know I'm going to see a lot of you on TV until, what's the date now? June 7th. They moved it because of a Jewish holiday.
They moved it to the 10th.
And Yoni observed.
They moved it to the 10th, and if anybody wants to go to SeanSpiller.com, they can help contribute so they can see even more ads of us. But
well, I'm sure.
But yeah, that's what it takes, right? We got to make sure we're out there with our message.
And we'll take you to shul with us because, you gave us an extra week on the election, by moving that date. But all I can say is thank you very much, Sean. Thank you, Yoni, for your expertise tonight. And I'm going to be a little hokey, but in this time, I have to say, God bless America. This is a great country. We're bigger than people who will abuse the system, threaten our liberties, threaten the well-being of people of color, threaten our future, but we're bigger than that. I have faith. God bless America. And to our listeners, thank you, and all the best of us for us as we go forward. And thank you, Sean. Thank you, Yoni. And again, God bless America.
Join us next time on January 30th for our next episode. You can catch past episodes of the podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Please subscribe to our Substack.